This better be good. This footage that Julio Rosas is gathering as we are speaking at this very moment, it better be world class. And by the way, I do hope he stays safe. So we just called Julio, and we're like, hey, ready for your interview? And he's like, I can't. I got to go. Things are crazy. I got to get video. And he went. And I said to Corey, I was like, who the hell does this guy think he is, Julio Rosas? This Julio Rosas. Julio, you don't operate on anybody else's time. You're on my time. You're on my time. My show. No, that's right. He's fantastic. So, again, I hope he gets great footage here. But I'll share some of the audio he's captured with you in a moment. Coming up on this very chaotic Monday, we've got Chuck Theiss joining us at 4:30. We'll talk to him, maybe, about what's going on in Washington, D.C. Chris Bedford is here from The Blaze. We talk about Kamala Harris and, I can't even believe I'm going to say this, Hillary Clinton. We'll talk about that with him, too. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, these Democrats, they're crazy, and they're showing up outside the convention. Julio has captured a bunch of audio. I played for you some of it in the last hour, just where they're yelling at the cops and stuff.
Piggy, go back home! Piggy, go back home! Or we'll bring the war home! Or we'll bring the war home!
That's the welcoming committee of paid lunatic activists that show up outside the convention. And he also captured this audio of one of the Democrats saying that she's got some demands, that the Democrats need to be more anti-Israel in order to earn her vote on Election Day. Oh, and by the way, that's a lie, too. She's going to vote for them no matter what. I love the posturing going on here. I'm not going to vote for you unless you're more anti-Israel. I'm like, come on, please. Please. Your entire personality is wrapped up in the fact that you're a diehard, dedicated Democrat.
Genocide Joe would still be on the ticket if it were not for this movement. For all of us. Our movement is one of the main reasons that you are now the Democratic candidate for president in the most powerful country on the planet. You, Vice President Harris, get to run for office because we ousted your predecessor right here in these streets.
These streets.
And it was never just about him. It was about the 40,000 Palestinians he helped kill. And you are telling us that not the other guy is a platform. We are telling you that you have to actually earn our votes.
You think Kamala Harris, I mean, it's so goofy. Like, do you think she's really concerning herself with earning votes? Is that the thing? Like, she's not, no, but please. And so there's that crazy lady screaming that we forced one of them out. We'll do it to you, too. We got rid of Biden. We're going to get rid of you. So lots of threats going on, intra-party threats right now between Democrats yelling at each other. These guys are mad about, anything, everything. They're mad about that Hamas isn't sufficiently heralded by the Democrats. Although, of course, Democrats have bent over backwards to advance certainly many of Hamas's lies. Anyway, this continues. And it's going to only lead to continuing chaos throughout the week. Now, on this question of Kamala replacing Joe in the most undemocratic event of any of our lifetimes in the United States, where, she's the nominee now. Okay, but who voted? Nobody. Okay, but how is she the nominee? Kamala Harris is the single luckiest moron in American history. She's like Forrest Gump with no charm. She's just there. All of a sudden, she's there again. Why is she there all the time? Why is she always in these positions? So now she's the nominee, and the Biden people, they can't shut up about how bitter they are about all of this. Now, most of this is being done to the extent that they're expressing it anonymously. Biden world is upset about Kamala Harris. But here's a funny thing from the New York Times today. As summarized by Breitbart, because we need the conservative media to actually pull the lead out of these stupid stories. Here's the lead. Here's what the actual news is. From the New York Times piece was titled, How Kamala Harris Picked Her Shots, a Vice Presidential Learning Curve. So the claim is that she wasn't an awful vice president. She just got better and better and better because she learned from her time in office. It prepared her for this moment. But here's what Breitbart pulled out. Headline, Joe Biden's former chief of staff admits Kamala Harris failed as vice president. failed as vice president. Vice President Kamala Harris failed in her role as Vice President. Ron Klain, President Joe Biden's former chief of staff, admitted Sunday. Under Harris's watch as vice president, millions of migrants flowed into the nation, inflation soared under massive spending, and the nation suffered the deadly Afghanistan withdrawal. Harris was reportedly the last person to speak with Biden before the administration began the Afghanistan retreat, and was the key member of the administration's plan to fix migration and inflation. Quote, "We were all united behind the idea she should be successful. We just didn't find the path to do it," Klain acknowledged to the New York Times. Quote, "I think it's a question of loyalty and dedication and focus on the mission," end quote. Uh-oh. In other words, Kamala Harris is insufficiently loyal. She wasn't loyal enough. She wasn't dedicated enough. What are you saying? She's lazy? What are you saying? Are you allowed to say that? Kamala Harris is lazy? Excuse me, sir. That is a woman of color you're talking about. Lazy? Who do you think you are? Ron Klain. He says it was a question of loyalty and dedication and focus on the mission. Oh, she was unfocused. She was bleary-eyed about what they should be doing in the Biden administration. So that's pretty, as far as like attacks within that party goes, especially from the upper echelon, especially on the record. Ron Klain on the record to the New York Times, yeah, she kind of sucked. She wasn't very good at this. She wasn't loyal. She wasn't dedicated. She wasn't focused. So, we tried. We gave her a runway. She just crashed on takeoff. That's it. And, of course, among the things that they gave her was the border. It's like, you're the border czar now. Good luck, Kamala. Because they wanted to pass the publicity responsibility for the failures on the border to her. And she had to wear that. Because, remember, if everybody had known all along that Kamala was going to be the nominee, do you think they would have given her the border mission? No. There's not a chance. Democrats would have never done that. They were operating under the assumption that Joe Biden really would continue in this race. Or somebody else entirely, not Kamala Harris. That's the assumption they were operating under. The fact that they made her border czar is as clear of an indication as any. And yet here we are. And now the cleanup mission is underway. So Breitbart continues, Klain, who reportedly lost 15 pounds after leaving his position for a cushy law job in the private sector. 15 pounds. How did you lose 15 pounds? How many Twinkies were you stuffing into your pie hole while you were in the Biden White House? That guy, he was hitting up the snack stand hard over there. Anyway, Biden's right-hand man throughout his career. He even helped Biden prep for his recent debate debacle. He left the president's side after Republicans gained subpoena power in the House. Jeffrey Zients, Biden's current chief of staff, was co-chair of the Biden-Harris transition team. He said Harris was deeply involved in the administration's failures. Quote, "When I started running the transition, the president's first directive to me was the vice president must be involved in every decision that hits his desk, from start to finish," he said. Ooh. Now, understand the world in which Jeff Zients is saying this now. Because what Kamala Harris and her campaign have attempted to do over the course of the past 2 weeks is say, oh, no, that's Biden's economy. Oh, no, that's Biden's border. No, we're going to fix all of that. We've got different visions. We're coming in. She's distancing herself from Joe Biden. But here is Jeff Zients, the current chief of staff for Biden, saying, not so fast, sweetheart. You were involved in everything. Every last decision. The president's very first directive to me was the vice president must be involved in every decision that hits his desk from start to finish. From start to finish. So you're not going anywhere. We're sinking together is what they're projecting here. Stop running away from us. Some Democrats attributed Harris's failures to just being new to the job of vice president. Breitbart continues here. Quote, "She had a learning curve as vice president, like Joe Biden had a learning curve as vice president," says Representative James Clyburn, a Biden ally, excusing Harris. Quote, "They didn't give her time to learn or room to grow. That was the problem." This is so embarrassing. How patronizing is that? Imagine being Kamala Harris and like cracking open the New York Times assuming she reads. And well, she doesn't read her briefing material, so maybe she doesn't read the New York Times. But cracking open the New York Times, and you're seeing James Clyburn's like, yeah, she had a slow start because she's kind of a moron, but eventually she picked it up. What? Thanks, Congressman. Representative Henry Cuellar said he predicted Harris's failures, especially on stopping the flow of migrants across the southern border. Quote, I don't want to say I told you so, but it did happen the way I said it would happen, he added. So here you go. This is these are all quotes that the New York Times was given. Breitbart has successfully surfaced them to explain them correctly. Here's what's going on here. And it's par for the course. There was another report in Axios this morning that kind of, touched on the same themes, which is that the Biden people are bitter about how all of this went down, and annoyed. Not enough to keep Joe Biden off that stage, though. Biden's still going up on that stage tonight for the latest round of humiliation. The terrible billing at the DNC. But Axios is saying that Biden's just very bitter. In fact, the headline is Biden's bitter, sweet exit. They say Biden's friends tell us that as the president heads to his Democrat National Convention send-off in Chicago tonight, he's somewhat relieved and pretty nostalgic, but also still stunned and pissed about the way he was pushed out of his re-election race. He's pissed about this. They say tonight's primetime speech by Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., 81, will be a heartfelt passing of the torch. He'll herald Vice President Kamala Harris, who will turn 60 in October, as the future of the party and the country. Yada, 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 yada. Just about how glowing and wonderful it's going to be tonight. They say for the first time in the epic life of Scranton Joe, it's the end of the road. Until now, aides had compared Biden with a shark. To breathe, he has to keep moving. Now the future holds a presidential library and retirement in Delaware. I think they're being optimistic here. That's an optimistic spin on Biden's future. I don't know what the future holds for Biden. I don't know if he'll see that presidential library assembled. Biden has 5 months to frame his legacy, they say, and his staff tells us make a final mark, perhaps with a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal. Yeah, we'll see. Watch Trump get elected and then the hostages get released. Watch that be what happens. And then Biden, of course, will take credit. Oh, look what I did. Mm-hmm. Sure. On the opening day of their convention, Democrats are ecstatic. They're giddy at how far Harris has come in the 29 days since Biden bowed out. But among some in Biden's innermost circle, there's astonishment about how instantly Harris became a celebrated, glamorous star. Biden world. They're confused by this. They don't understand it. How did Kamala Harris become a star? Some Biden stalwarts blame the press for forcing him out and now seethe at what they see as fawning coverage of Harris. When I read this morning, I laughed out loud to myself, as you would. I laughed out. It's so funny. So the Biden people are all of a sudden saying, man, that press, they really are unfair. They forced me out, and now they're giving over-the-top, ridiculous fawning coverage to Kamala Harris. Yeah. Welcome to the party, pal. We've been calling this out for a while. We knew this was going on. The right has known about this, and now Biden world is like, man, this media. It was fine when they were selling our garbage, but now that they're ramming somebody else's garbage down our throat, we don't really like this anymore. Yeah. It's just hard to keep track of all the craziness coming out of the DNC already. Let me give you an example. One is the great Amber Duke over at the Spectator post today, the following on X. She says that Tim Walz tried to pull out Ebonics, apparently, at a congressional Black Caucus meeting for the DNC this morning. According to Politico, quote, you can count on white – this is Tim Walz speaking. You can count on white politicians coming to black communities to ask for their vote. What's different this time is – we have a black woman gonna lead us. Tim Walz, the single whitest governor I've ever seen. That's his presentation this morning to the segregated black meeting at the Democrat convention. We have a black woman gonna lead us, he says. Remarkable. Also, Tim Walz, he did a segregated meeting as well with the AAPI group, that's the Asian American Pacific Islander group, and that's where he was introduced as the first Chinese vice president.
Well, Tim Walz is going to be the first Chinese vice president of our country. When he broke out in Mandarin with me like 5 years ago, my jaw dropped. I said, "Really?"
Wow, that's embarrassing, awful. Free Beacon with a headline today on this particular topic. Tim Walz praised Chinese communism as a system where, quote, everyone shares. This is some time ago, but as a high school teacher in the 1990s, Alana Goodman reporting today, Democrat vice presidential candidate and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz appeared to extol life under Chinese communism, telling his students that it is a system in which, quote, everyone shares, end quote, and gets free food and housing. Quote, it means that everyone is the same and everyone shares, end quote, Walz said during a lesson on Chinese communist system in November of 1991. Quote, the doctor and the construction worker make the same. The Chinese government and the place they work for provide housing, and 14 kilograms or about 30 pounds of rice per month. They get food and housing, end quote. Tim Walz's remarks were reported in a 1991 article in Nebraska's Alliance Times-Herald that focused on his work on student exchange programs in China. At the time, Walz was teaching social studies at a Nebraska high school and apparently extolling the virtues of communism. What was he doing? What? So Tim Walz, let me get this straight. So Tim Walz was teaching, he was working on student exchange programs in China. He was talking about how great communism was, and he started the local Gay Straight Alliance Club at his school. Do I have all of that right? I think I do. And he was the assistant coach who pretended to be the actual coach of the football team. This guy is he uniquely awful? Maybe behind Kamala Harris. They're pretty awful. The two of them. All right. It's really crazy to listen to all that. Okay. Coming up on the program, we have joining us Chuck Theiss. We're going to talk about one D.C. council member just getting arrested by the FBI. No big deal. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 4:35 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Coming up, top of the hour, the great Chris Bedford will join us from The Blaze at 5 o'clock. We'll talk to him about Kamala Harris's many weaknesses. He's got some thoughts on that subject. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. D.C. Council member Trayon White is among the more colorful politicians in our entire country. You remember he in 2018 accused Jewish people of controlling the weather, and then in an effort to try and survive that publicity crisis, I guess, he went and took a tour of the Holocaust Museum, but he got bored and he left halfway through. Yeah, that's Trayon White. He's a character. But today he can add to his laundry list of zaniness that he's been arrested by the FBI. Yesterday he was arrested by the FBI under a lot of mystery, and we find out today the reason for that is because the feds now allege that Trayon White took tens of thousands of dollars in bribes, according to the Washington Post. But if you look at the number, it's actually in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, $156,000 in undisclosed kickbacks and cash payments to pressure officials with the D.C. Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services and the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement to extend a contract for a company that was working with them. And he was taking kickbacks in order to keep that all going. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here with more on this story and with reaction to it is Chuck Theiss. He's a D.C. political and policy consultant. We always turn to him on so many of these D.C. Stories. Chuck, good to have you with us, sir.
Well, good afternoon, Vince. How are you?
I'm doing all right, but I'm curious, what's going on here? Trayon White is upholding an old Washington tradition of taking bribes, at least according to the FBI.
Yeah, a lot of money, $150,000. This all started in 2020, in May of 2020, when this contractor was denied an extension of his contract because allegedly the data that he was providing to the district was fraudulent. Basically, this contractor was responsible to do background checks. I don't know on whom. And the district determined that the background checks that he was providing were fraudulent, and they canceled the contract. This individual went to Trayon and Trayon White, council member Trayon White, and allegedly offered him $20,000 to help correct the situation. And according to the government's investigation, Trayon dutifully tried to correct the situation and put the $20,000 in his pocket. Some time transpired. This contractor found himself in some more trouble. I believe it's PPP loan fraud and other forms of fraud. And in the process of that, disclosed that he knew of a corrupt public official in D.C. More investigations were done. Basically, a sting operation was conducted over the course of what seems like 2 months, during which Trayon White allegedly accepted $140,000 in bribes, and also a trip to Las Vegas and a trip to the Dominican Republic. And yesterday at his apartment, interestingly, not in Ward 8, the part of the city that he represents, but in Ward 6, which is a place he shouldn't be living as per his job, the FBI showed up in very forcefully. They had battering rams. They had multiple cars. There was at least 10 personnel on site, and they arrested him and held him overnight.
So
and it's kind of a big deal. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, why is it a big deal?
Well, it's kind of a big deal that they held him overnight. Typically, with an elected official, it's not like there was something imminent here. We're not talking about someone who was holding someone hostage or there was harm for an individual, right? So typically, if you're an elected official, they talk to you and your attorney, and they agree to some terms where you surrender yourself in the morning. They process you. You see a judge. And by lunchtime, you and your attorney are back on the street having lunch, trying to figure out how to undo all these problems.
So what does this tell you?
For them,
so what does it tell you that they didn't do it that way? I mean, that's a pretty big deal that you show up with force and battering rams and a big
battering
team.
Rams,
ready to fight, basically. What do you think led them to believe that was necessary?
Well, talking to a law enforcement official who is not familiar with the exact particulars of this situation, but has dealt with the arrest of elected and public officials elsewhere, his guess is that the feds reached out and made an offer and tried to arrange a surrender, and Trayon White resisted. And basically told them to, pound sand. And they gave him another opportunity. They usually give you two. The first one, okay, we've shocked you. With the second one, hopefully you're having more reasonable thoughts. And he told them to pound sand again, and they don't like that. So they're like, fine, we'll pick you up on Sunday, and that means you're not going to see a judge until Monday, and you get to spend half a day in prison.
So this is just to a trained eye. That's the scenario that you suspect occurred, or at least your law enforcement source suspects.
Yeah. He basically played around with them, and they got upset, and they're like, "Okay, watch what we can do." And he's lucky. They could have picked him up on Friday night, and he would have sat in prison until Monday morning.
I laughed when I saw this headline because of how much I kind of thought it's not that much of a surprise, I guess, and sad that that's the case. Were you surprised at all by this, that how all this went down?
No, and it's unfortunate. I've worked in district politics for decades, and there have been whispers since Trayon first was elected 8 years ago that he shakes down contractors, that he puts his hand out and expects it to be greased. I've never had anyone present me evidence. I've never had anyone basically say, there's something here that requires the FBI's involvement. But I'll tell you, I've been in this city a long time, and there's only one other council member who I ever heard such rumors about, and that was Michael Brown, and he went to prison for taking bribes. So the people who share these rumors, they're fairly credible. No one wants to call someone a crook who isn't a crook. So, no, it didn't surprise me. As a matter of fact, when I got a call from a journalist, the individual who scooped this story, Tom Sherwood, and he asked what I thought, the first word out of my mouth was graft. I don't think this is drugs. I don't think this is guns. I don't think this is racketeering, gambling, whatever, shoplifting. No, this is graft.
So
And,
So in the mystery of last night's news headlines, because we knew that he was arrested, and Tom Sherwood calls you and you're like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And you thought this is probably bribery.
Yes, absolutely. Bribery or a shakedown. There's various ways of going about doing this. But yeah, this comes as no surprise to me. And it's just unfortunate because the people who are represented by Trayon White live in a part of the city where people have the greatest needs. It has the highest violence. It has the highest rates of truancy. It has the highest rates of juvenile malnutrition. I mean, everything in society that isn't a good metric can be found in Ward 8. Therefore, those are the individuals who require the most effective, honest representatives in government so that maybe government can help to meet their needs. And instead, here's a guy who's using his influence to look out for himself and also, in effect, stealing from at-risk children. One of the programs that this disreputable contractor sought to secure was a $5.2 million program to help at-risk youth. And when you shake that program down for $150,000, that's $150,000 fewer dollars that can go to helping at-risk youth. So this is really, this is bad on many levels, and good on none.
Do you think it's possible that this isn't just Trayon White, that there are other lawmakers who could be caught up in this?
I don't think there are any lawmakers in D.C. that would enter into a scheme with Trayon White. None of them really respect him. You mentioned the Rothschild Jews controlling the weather conspiracy theory that he publicly espoused some years ago. There have been other instances where he has made his fellow council members squirm. I can't imagine anyone involving themselves in a criminal enterprise with him.
So even the average D.C. council member knows it's a bad idea to go into business with Trayon White.
Absolutely, even the below average D.C. council member, yeah. But this doesn't necessarily mean that this ends with Trayon White. I'm not at liberty to say who the contractor is because I'm only 99% sure, and I don't want to defame a contractor that potentially isn't the one involved in this. But if it is the one who I think is involved in it, they had prior involvement in the D.C. lottery and sports gaming contracting scandals as a subcontractor to that. And, it's just amazing how talented some of these companies are. They can do violence interruption programs for children and also manage the lottery. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
Obviously, it's amazing. So obviously there isn't a firm that has those capabilities. And certainly not a firm that's involved in $10,000 and $20,000 and $30,000 bribery schemes, because that shows that they're a bunch of half-wits.
Yes.
But it leads you to wonder, is this the tip of the iceberg? My friend in law enforcement says that when they roll out charges like this during the course of the investigation, it's not uncommon for them to find other wrongdoings. And as we know when dealing with the feds, the first rollout of charges and the first plea bargain offer that they put on the table is like the best, right? It only gets worse from here. So am I saying that Trayon did other things that are wrong and illegal? No, because I don't know that. But am I saying that based on history, very often the tip of the iceberg is rolled out and the feds basically say, take this deal before things get a lot worse for you. Yes. That's what history suggests.
So does the arrest of Trayon White mean that there's no more corruption in D.C.? Is it over now? because when we talk about bribery, honestly, one of the things I first thought was like, okay, he was arrested for bribery, but bribery, that sort of seems like a pretty commonplace thing in D.C., but perhaps at lower levels. But I hear all the time, like, the difficulty in permitting and licensing, and unless you're greasing palms, you're not going anywhere.
So they didn't cut the head off the serpent yesterday. They stepped on a worm. And the number of people in district government and district politics who are disreputable was only reduced by one yesterday. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate, but it is a reality. But I'll tell you one thing. The feds have been gun-shy in D.C. because they did botch some investigations in the last decade. They took out Kwame Brown and Michael Brown and Harry Thomas, all who were proven to be crooks. But then they went after Vince Gray, the former mayor, and it turned out to be a witch hunt, and he was ultimately vindicated, or as I like to say, Vince-dicated. And you should like that too, Vince.
I do. I appreciate that.
And they were a little gun shy after that because it was very embarrassing for them, as it should be. And I'm glad that they're no longer gun shy because, it's just like driving down the highway. If there's no cops on it, people do 70, then 75, then 90, then 100. And eventually you need to put a cop out there and say, hey, folks, it's 65. Let's be a little more careful here.
So one of the things I'm taking away, though, from your assessment, which is very smart, Chuck, as always, thank you, is that Trayon White being isolated on the council, that he wasn't really close to people and that they didn't, that they wouldn't go into a criminal enterprise or even a legitimate business with him, that suggests to me that he wasn't protected. I mean, if you don't have allies around you and you're running a scheme like this, you're toast. But if you have people who are powerful around you, who are linked to you, there's a way perhaps to dodge all of this. Is that one of the lessons here?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Especially if you attach yourself to people who are too big to fail, so to speak. Yeah. And Trayon didn't have that. He was isolated. He was operating without allies. And in fact, we'll see that come to fruition on the 17th of September. The council's in recess right now, but on the 17th they reconvene, and the first act that the council chairman, Phil Mendelson, will take is to strip Trayon White of his chairmanship of the Committee on Parks and Rec. And so he will be further isolated. They won't just strip him of that committee. They'll remove him from all committees. So basically he'll just be one of 13 votes on the council, and they'll also begin the process of investigating not just what Trayon did wrong, but what the council's tools are for remedying that. And that's a bit of a sticky wicket because unless this whole thing has been adjudicated by then, which is very unlikely, the witnesses and the evidence that would be available to the council will be unavailable to the council. The FBI and the feds will be holding on to that. And in fact, Trayon White's lawyers would never let him testify under oath to the council while being investigated by the FBI. So the council's a little hamstrung with regard to what it can do to Trayon. It could expel him, but it's just not a good look to expel someone who hasn't had their day in court, or at least hasn't been subject to a very thorough investigation. So we'll have to see how the politics of all that play out. And in fact, he's on the ballot in November.
Yes.
He won the Democratic primary in June. He is on the ballot in November, and there's no mechanism to remove. The only person who can remove him from the ballot is himself.
Yeah. And it gets so much more complicated because if it's not resolved by November, which it won't be, and he gets reelected, which he is likely to be, then what are you saying? Like, screw you to the voters? And if you throw them out after that? So it's going to be very fascinating to see what happens. And one more thing. I do have the audio. I wanted to play it. This is Trayon White stepping outside of the courthouse. Reporters throwing some questions to him. Did you accept bribes?
Anything, council member? Did you accept these bribes, council member? Anything you want to add? Anything you want to add? Sir.
Unbelievable. So a good old fashioned corruption story. I feel like I live in Gotham City or something. The guy's squirreling away. Did you accept bribes? No answer.
Yeah. Well, I was really hoping for a press conference and a lengthy statement and a lot of questions and answers.
Yeah.
I had actually popped an entire bowl of popcorn awaiting that. And so I'm a little disappointed, but based on Councilmember White's history, it won't be long before he's either on Instagram or Twitter or using some other method to push back on all of this. I actually think he'll dig in and fight it. Might even believe that he could win a jury trial. And hey, let's keep in mind, these are allegations.
Yeah.
Nothing has been proven in court.
That's right.
So,
That's right. And I wonder who he will say is behind all of this. I just wonder. Okay.
maybe
in the
the
meantime,
people who control the weather.
yeah, the weather controlling people. Chuck Theiss, as always, thank you, sir. Great to talk to you. Hey, coming up, just minutes from now, we'll be joined by Chris Bedford from The Blaze. We'll talk to him about the incredible Kamala Harris and her effort to convince you that she's not as awful as we all know she is. That's it.